Good day, my friends. I've been asked before, how does God speak to us? And sometimes it is the small, still voice within our minds, but sometimes it's through other people's or something that we read, something that we watch on TV, but God will often back it up and tell us twice. I've found that. Now, Padre Pio used to say that God speaks to us all the time, but we're so used to his voice that we don't hear it anymore. And I think that that is true. Today I went to confession, and the priest, I go to confession weekly because I want to gain indulgences and offer up for the holy souls with certain devotions that I do. So I need to be having confession each week. And because of that, I'm very often confessing just venial sins. But the priest knows where I'm coming from. But today the priest reminded me that it's not just the things we do, but sometimes the things we don't do that we need to confess. Sins of omission. And I said, okay, Father, yes, thank you. And I came out, and then we had Mass. And it was a different priest, not the one that confessed me, that read the homily. And he mentioned the sins of omission, or something that struck about the same conversation. And I thought, that's God speaking to me, because it has come twice to me. And that's very often how God speaks to us. And sometimes God will speak to us in an audible voice. And I've spoken before about hearing God's voice on a couple of occasions in my life. That's all in a very audible way. But getting back to what Padre Pio said, God speaks to us all the time, but we don't listen because he's constantly speaking to us. We get used to it, and we need to kind of step back, still ourselves, become mindful, and then we hear his voice. And it reminds me, I've told this story once before, but a good while ago, about my mother's clock. My mother has a clock on her mantle that plays the Westminster chime. And so every quarter of an hour, it will play a part of the tune until it gets to the full hour and plays the whole tune. And I walked in one day, having visited them, and I heard the clock chime, the quarter of an hour. And I said, oh, you still have your clock? And she said, oh, yes. And I said, it's still working. You know, she's had it about 30 or 40 years. And she said, yes, but we never hear it because it's a noise that they're familiar with. And so they don't take any notice of it. And the only time they hear it is when it's winding down and the tune gets out of sync and so makes a funny noise. And that's the only time they hear it. And I thought that's so relationable to what Padre Pio said, that God speaks to us all the time, but we don't hear him because we're so used to him. And so I thought I'd just mention that. But today, God spoke to me through the confession and during the homily and backed up what the priest had said. And that's very often how he'll speak to us. But God can speak to us in many ways, through magazines and TV and what we read, and through homilies, of course, but also through the still small voice. But to hear that still small voice, we need to be quiet and still our minds and listen. God bless.